Now, this is quite different from the episodes that have come before it. We're going to talk about stereo field, which in a way is the first of the effects videos, although the videos that come after this will be more traditional effects. But stereo field is really, really important, and to be able to do it and to be able to write about it, you need to have a good understanding of what stereo is. So stereo, lots of people get very scared by stereo. They're not sure what it is, they're not sure how it works. They think it's the same as surround sound. It definitely isn't the same as surround sound. But most people have probably bought or own a stereo device, right? They've bought a pair of stereo headphones, or they've bought a mobile phone which has stereo speakers on it, for example. And it's a really quite straightforward concept. All the concept is that human beings generally have two functional ears. Not always, but generally. The majority of us do. So when you are listening to a real piece of music being generated, say by a band, when you go to a concert, you are hearing very slightly different things in your left ear than you are in your right ear. And that, if we can recreate that in a recording, it will make the recording sound much more natural. And now that doesn't just mean that we put loads of stuff over to the left and loads of stuff over to the right. That is surround sound. Okay, if you go to the cinema and there's a helicopter flying across the screen, then chances are the sound will probably travel from the speakers on the left side of the room to the right side of the screen, or vice versa, depending on which direction it's going. That's surround sound. Stereo is not quite that. Stereo, at the moment, everything in our track is set to dead center. That means that if we play it, there's an exactly equal amount of sound coming out of the left speaker and coming out of the right speaker. Now, we can shift it so it will go off to the left or the right, but what we actually want to do is we want to create a wide field, because if you went and saw that band that we were talking about a minute ago, they wouldn't all be sitting on top of each other. So they would be spread around the stage, but it could be also that they have speakers at the front of the stage which are also broadcasting a stereo signal. So we don't just want things left and right, we want things off-center. I'm going to show you how you can do this really quite straightforwardly in Ableton. Although, I have to say that Ableton's panning features, which are what you use to manipulate stereo, I'm not a massive fan of. It is definitely easier to pan effectively in GarageBand, but I'm going to talk you through it. I'm going to show you exactly what you need. In the classroom where you are learning, there will be a copy of this display. Okay, this is a panning display. And what this is this shows you the traditional locations of various different instruments. We've been recording now for over 100 years. And over the course of those 100 years, recording engineers have worked out the best stereo locations in the mix for things to be in order for them to sound best. And we normally talk about panning. There's two terms here, okay? Stereo is what we're doing overall. Panning is how you adjust the stereo. Panning is normally done by referencing a clock face. So you can see here that there are some little diagrams which look like clocks, and they help us to understand the stereo positions a little bit better. So I've put this page up first because the track at the top of our mix is the piano track. So I thought it made sense for us to start with piano. Now you can see in piano, there are actually two different options, depending on whether you've recorded in mono or whether the track is actually in stereo already, i.e. it was recorded with more than one microphone. Now our track is recorded in mono. So that is recommending that the piano track should be at 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock. And that is how we describe it. We describe it as 10 and 2. That is the description that we're going to give in our write-up. What does that mean? Well, if you go into Ableton, the pan controls are over to the side here. And by default, we don't have a clock face dial on the side here. This is what I don't like about Ableton. You have to switch into a different mode to be able to see that clock face. So if I press the tab key, I'm going to go back into the other mode, and here you can see we've got some dials that look a little bit like clock faces, and you can see that I can manipulate them, and I can, by moving my mouse up and down, I can send it either to the right or I can send it to the left. And by default, as I've said, they are bang in the middle. Okay, we call that 12 o'clock. Now, the thing I don't like about Ableton is that when you pan on the dial, it doesn't give you any numerical values. So if you're panning, you have to guess what that means. If you want the numerical values, you have to switch back into the other mode, and you can see that this is now saying 21L or 21 left. So I've put that 21 points to the left. Now you can adjust that in this dial, okay, to get the precise number that you wanted. I was going for 20. So you can see that that minus 20 is roughly, or 20 left, is roughly that 10 o'clock position that we had. But you'll notice we can only set it one direction or the other. You can't set it to both directions at the same time. And that's what we want to really create the stereo width. So what can we do? Well, the simplest thing to do is to duplicate the track, right? Duplicate the track. And that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to click on the grand piano track with 2 fingers, or right click, and I'm going to click duplicate. Right, and I've now got 2 identical copies of that, and actually because I had it set to 17 left, it's duplicated that as well. So you can see they're both set to 17 left, which I probably should have got rid of before I duplicated it. So let me put it back dead center. It's a little bit fiddly on a trackpad. Oh, can't get it. There we go. Really can't get it. There we go. Okay, so we're both at center. C for center. We want one at 20 left and one at 20 right. Okay, so I'm going to go 20 left by pulling down on this one. And I'm going to go 20 right by pulling down on this one. I just clicked on where it said C, and then I'm moving my cursor up until it hits it. And you can see now that we've got one track at 10 o'clock and one track at 2 o'clock, which ties in really nicely to what we were just looking at. You can see that that matches up really nicely. And what that means is that piano is no longer sitting in the center. It's just been given a little bit of width to sit out, and it gives it what's known as its own space. So it straight away should sound nicer. It's quite hard to tell when it's just the piano playing, but when something else comes in, particularly on my headphones now, I can hear that the voice is still dead center because we haven't touched it, and actually that's where we're going to leave it. And the piano is just out a little bit wider. Okay, and it sounds more natural, sounds more realistic. That's why it's important that we do this. So that's our first one. Moving on, our second row is our vocal. Now, I know it's not a real vocal, it's a synth track, but it is still playing the vocal part, probably the most important part of the song. So again, if we consult our display, vocals happens to be on the same page, and you can see that vocals are traditionally left center, which means that we don't have to touch them. Now, you don't have to follow the traditional locations. You can experiment a bit, but what I will say is that the traditional locations pretty much will always give you a nice mix. So if you're going to go a little bit off-piste and do something of your own, you need to make sure that it actually sounds nice. But vocals, 12 o'clock, don't need to do anything. Don't need to duplicate it. We can just leave it exactly where it is. Leaving it at center is absolutely fine. Okay, next up is the synth, and it's the melodic synth, this one. Let me put it on solo. Okay, the guitar-y sounding one. Playing the chords. Okay, now synth doesn't have its own section on the panning display because they're treated the same as keyboards and therefore pianos, because they are keyboard instruments. So actually, we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to go 10 and 2 with that and see what that sounds like. So I'm going to duplicate Drippy Cave. There we go. Take the solo off. I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to go 20 left and 20 right. Now, I can do that because actually the piano and the synth never play at the same time. So they're not going to be sitting on top of each other in the mix, because when the synth starts, the piano finishes. So it's absolutely fine. So let's have a listen to that. Let's have a listen at the end of the piano. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I like that quite a lot. So I'm going to leave that where they are. Now, the next track, the pink one, is it's a bass track. And if I go back onto my panning display, bass instruments, okay, anything bassy, we've got an actual bass guitar here, and we've got the kick drum, for example, are traditionally left right dead center at the mix, like the vocal. And that's because if you've got loads of bass out wide, it can sound really, really distracting. So we're going to leave disto alone completely. In fact, no, hang on, I'm talking rubbish. Oh, that's a synth. Okay, that's the descant. Sorry, I'll come back to basses in just a second. I was getting my tracks muddled. Now, what we could do with this one is we could experiment a little bit. So why don't we? Let's throw it out really wide and see what happens. So I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm actually going to go all the way left and all the way right, just to really sort of use some strange panning. So this is not a traditional location, but I happen to have done it before, and I know it sounds quite nice. Having that separated from the vocal, because they're both similar sounds, actually happens a lot. Actually helps a lot. Okay, so I'm going to leave that out quite wide. So we've got 50 left and 50 right, which is a lot wider than what we had previously. It's easier to visualize it sometimes on the other view by pressing tabs. We've got 10 and 2, 10 and 2, and then what would we call that in clock? We'd probably call that 8 and 4, maybe 7 and 5. Okay, but it's all the way out. That's the crucial thing. Okay, then I can go back to what I was saying about with bass parts, which is this one here, traditionally left dead in the center. Okay, not going to touch that one. And then the kick drum, again, very bass heavy, generally left in the center. Snare, very prominent, so although not that bassy, also traditionally left in the center. Hi-hats, now hi-hats we can have a bit of fun with. So if we look here, we've got a whole page dedicated to drums. So hi-hat is suggested again as 10 and 2, just to give it a bit of separation from the rest of the drum kit. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to duplicate this track. I hope I've got enough tracks. You're only allowed 16. How many have I got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, we're going to be fine. We're going to be absolutely fine. In fact, 16 is a good number. So hi-hat, I'm going to go 20 left and 20 right. Okay, so we've got a bit of width there. And toms, all right, toms are shown as 3 and 9, which is quite an unusual panning location. So we're going to try that. Now 3 and 9, we're going to have to work out what the numerical values for that will be. So there'll be a bit of experimenting here. I'm going to go duplicate the tom track. That didn't work. Why didn't that work? Duplicate. There we go. Okay, now I reckon, in fact, let's set it, let's do it on the other one. So we've got toms over here. So I'm going to go out to, I've done the left first. So what will that be? I'm going to go out to 9, 3, 9. No, talking rubbish. 9, 3. Now just check that they're both the same value. See, one's come out as 29 and one's come out as 30. So I'm going to go 30, 30. And that gives us some nice width on the drum track. So let's put all of these on solo. You can do that by holding down the command key. And let's listen to our drums now that we've got a bit of stereo. That's much better, okay? Having the hi-hat out there wide, but I didn't actually play the toms, did I? Okay, that is a big improvement over what we had previously. So there we go, and that's it. Okay, now the understanding of it is maybe quite complicated, but actually the doing of it is not very complicated at all. Let's listen to what our mix sounds like now. Here comes the voice in the center, and it's almost like the piano is round the voice now. They're not just squarely on top of each other. It's rather nice. Here comes the synths. Might level that descant down a little bit. Now the biggest impression will come when all of the instruments are in. Which is coming up now. distortion coming through on my headphones. I'm just going to level the master down just a smidge, try and get rid of that. That was more for me than anything else. Don't worry too much about that. It was just clipping in my earphones. Good. Okay, so that is... I'm actually going to set that back because we're going to have to level later, so I'm going to make sure that's okay. That is stereo field. Now, in terms of evidencing your stereo field, all you actually need is one screenshot and a little bit of explanation about what you've done and why you've done it. Now, I would suggest, actually, for visualization purposes, that you screenshot on this view, because it gives a much, your examiner, your marker straight away is going to be able to see really easily exactly where you've set everything. And we're going to be talking about clock positions, so it makes sense to do this. So I'm going to take a screenshot. Of course, I still have my trusty presentation ready to go. Got it on a different tab. Okay, so let's make some space. We were last on screenshot 14. Which will make this screenshot 15. And then some explanation. So, stereo field. This is me working on the stereo field of my track. Stereo is an effect which is created using at least 2 speakers, because humans generally have 2 ears. By moving things in the stereo field, I'm going to put moving things in quote marks because we're not actually moving them, we're creating an illusion. I'm going to put which is a perceived effect. Okay, we're not actually moving anything. All we're doing is adjusting the amount that's coming out of one speaker or the other. We can make our recordings sound more natural. Adjusting stereo field also gives instruments, now let's put parts, also give parts their own space in the mix so they don't crowd each other. Stereo is adjusted using pan controls, and we normally talk about clock faces when we do this. The clock face is the location. The pan location is given by giving the clock face position. Clock face is 2 words, Mr. Sanvicasi. For example, 10 and 2 on the dials. Okay, so we have added stereo field. Let's put the locations in. I have worked on the field as follows. I'm going to go piano, 10 and 2. Voice was in the middle, so I may as well put that. It's going to get too small on the font. Synths. And 2. Synth descant. I'm going to put brackets really wide. and I'm going to say 5 and 7. Descant. I'll sort out this font size in the middle in a minute. I might just put them one after the other, whatever works best. Then what have we got? We've got hi-hats at 10 and 2. And what was the last thing? Oh yeah, toms at 3 and 9. And that's it. That's actually all you need. Let's try and sort some of this out. Actually, that's okay, isn't it? I've worked the field as follows. Okay, there we go. And that's it for stereo field. That's all you have to do. When we do our second assignment, which is producing an Ableton instruction manual, we may go into a little bit more detail. We've been quite detailed here. Yeah, important to have an awareness of what stereo field is. And now we've got a nice stereo mix as opposed to a mono mix, which is what we had when everything was just sitting on top of each other. So a significant improvement that demonstrates to your examiner that you understand what you are doing. So next episode will be episode 6, and that is where we will start adding effects. We've got 3 effects that we have to do. And then if you wish to, you also have the opportunity to add some extra effects and talk about things you've experimented with if you really are looking to push that distinction, which I hope all of you are. So I shall see you very soon for episode 6.